Hello.
Hey, Daniel.
You hear me well?
Yes, very well. Loud and clear.
How are you?
Very well. And yourself?
Kind of worn out actually. I've been working a lot lately.
Working a lot.
Just got back from work, super late. But it's good.
Yeah, well, it's service to humanity, whatever it is.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Any work we do, goes in that direction. So,
Yeah.
let me see. What is it that I have here? I'm trying to. Oh, this is this. Okay. Okay. So, how was your experience with the last video?
Good. It was the first on anti-aging. Lots of new information in there. Stuff I never heard about before. It's actually a whole new subject for me, anti-aging. I've never given it that much thought.
Right. And today, I want to spend at least a half an hour conversing, giving you more information, and but this particular information about anti-aging and other subjects that are intertwined with this is extremely important and extremely significant, to a point that I want to ask you that what we will talk about today and all the information I'm going to share with you, please keep in mind that it overrides any information you may have obtained through the video classes or through the future classes or our previous conversations. It's that crucial that we talk about this. Okay. Nutrition is a field that is changing rapidly. It's very difficult to keep, and you will see this when you begin to work in this field. It's very difficult to keep abreast of all that is going on. This organism tends to have like a tendency to experience things, meaning that if a knowledge is just pure knowledge that doesn't resonate with some particular experience here in the organism, it simply goes through. There is not even the energy to read a book or to watch a video or to become informed really until there is something that is actually part of the experience here. So everything that I have shared with through the video classes or through my coaching sessions with my students comes from some level of experience dealing with a body that in no way has been easy to deal with. It has been very challenging in this lifetime to deal with a body that is in a way oversensitive. Just a second.
So there's been new advances in the field.
Well, there are new advances all the time. Now, how new this is it's not that new, but in a way it's new for me, and it's not at all either. I have this book that I recommend in the video classes also. I have had it for a long time, but I read very little of it. I have recommended it because I knew it had some valuable information, but I hadn't really had the energy or the interest in reading it because it was somewhat foreign to my experience. Until something came that has made it very urgent to look into this material. And what happened is that I began to help a person in Ecuador, and this is a young woman in her 40s that is experiencing ALS. And as you may know, ALS is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Is a very deadly disease. It usually kills in 1, 2, or 3 years. And this woman, when we started the sessions, she was really desperate because she was facing death and she felt unprepared. to a point that she was, in fact, and still she's not even talking. Yeah, she communicates with me on Skype by typing. So this has really motivated me to look into the neurological diseases in a much deeper way.
Is this the same person who got good results with MMS?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But the good results happened with MMS, but obviously a disease like this involves challenges and at all levels that you can imagine. Yeah, physical, mental, spiritual, consciousness, at all levels. Energetic. So we are working at every level possible to help her, with a friend of mine that is working in the energetics, to help her having a peaceful transition, if it's the case, or having or helping her to get well. As you may know, ALS is a disease that affects the movement in the body, and it happens as a result of neuronal death. Yeah, so the neurons that are controlling movement begin to die until simply the individual finds him or herself prisoner in a body that cannot move.
This is what Hawkins has, right?
Exactly, and it usually kills because eventually the breathing, which requires muscle tone and muscle work, is not available either, and then death happens. However, now they can extend the life of the organism with an artificial lung, and I think that Stephen Hawking has an artificial lung. That's one possibility, or which means that his system is he's being helped with a machine to breathe. The other possibility is that simply he's having the disease sometimes progresses only to a point, and he may the muscles that control breathing may have been spared from the disease. I don't know his situation in particular, but he has survived. I think it's 40 years in this situation, which is a very difficult life, as you can imagine.
How many years?
40 years, I think. Yeah, but it's a very strange case. Usually the patient wants to die, so they in fact, my brother-in-law, who is my wife's brother, he was an MD, a doctor, and 3 years ago he was diagnosed with this thing, and in 1 year he was dead. And he didn't want to live at all, because in those conditions people they just want to leave. So he didn't do much effort to extend his life. He just went fast to the other side. In 1 year he was dead. However, he was able to write a book that for him was important before his death. But well, let's go back to what concerns us. This is what has triggered, a lot of reading and investigation around this, and I'm still in the process. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I definitely I have found some of the answers, and I'm going to try to explain them to you. Okay.
Just what are the causes? Is this one of the? I'm sorry, you're probably going to get into that. But the causes of this sclerosis.
Right. What causes it? It's a mystery, and it's not a mystery. There could be factors that are unknown, like the very fact that MMS has helped this woman very significantly points to some level of a virus or a parasite that could be affecting the neurology of the brain and the nerves, and it has not been discovered because MMS is a very powerful and wide spectrum antibiotic. However, the mainstream model on how this happens is very interesting and valuable, I would say, and it offers a working model that, as you will see, can also help immensely. and that's what I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to explain. Well, it's called excitotoxicity. Now, how this operates?
Exitotoxicity.
Excitotoxicity. So it comes from excitation of the neurons, and
That's glutamate.
yes, it has to do with the neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is an excitation substance. It excites the brain. It's necessary for life, of course, but the problem is that for some reason glutamate begins to accumulate in the brain, and then it keeps exciting the neurons, and then eventually the neurons in this process of excitation, they die, and they die by the millions. That's why the disease is so fast. So they die by the millions, and and then this book that I recommend to read, and I'm gonna show it to you again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I will have to give up with that, and just let me get online the name of the book. It takes a moment. The name of the book is Excitotoxins. That's the name of the book.
Okay.
And The Taste That Kills. That's
The taste.
The Taste That Kills. That's the whole name. Now I will find it. Just a moment. Excitotoxins.
Is glutamic acid the precursor to glutamate?
Yes. Yes, very much so. And
Because yesterday we read that you need glutamic acid as a cofactor to produce glutathione from N-acetylcysteine,
it's possible, yes.
which I found very surprising.
Yes. Just a second. So here is the whole name. It's Exitotoxins, and the book was written by Russel Blaylock, MD. Yeah, he's a medical doctor.
Blaylock.
I'm sending it to you. Blaylock. Blaylock. Now,
Great.
the problem is the following. According to Blaylock, and apparently there is agreement among the neurologists that have a holistic orientation, there is agreement that not only ALS, but also MS, Alzheimer, and all these neurological diseases, Parkinson, that are affecting humanity nowadays and increasing exponentially, have their origin in excitotoxins. Yeah. So what happens during the phase where the neurons die per millions, during an excitation phase that leads to this neurological damage, that when accumulates enough, then it triggers the full disease, right? What happens in that moment? That's what I want you to see clearly. Okay?
So,
Yes.
Sorry, what causes that moment?
Sorry?
Excessive What would cause such a moment?
Right, that's what I'm going to explain. What causes that particular thing, right? Because if you can avoid that particular instance, that particular moment, then you protect the organism and the brain, right? So, let's retrace time a little bit. My mother developed a neurological disease that is very mysterious, and she's 85 now, and it's relatively mild compared with the things we are talking about, but is significant in the sense that makes her life difficult. this disease is called Ardent Tongue, lengua ardiente in Spanish, Ardent Tongue. Basically, the patient begins to bruxate, yeah? They chew their teeth and their tongue, and they cannot stop, and this happens during the day, not during the night. Strangely, after a particular dental treatment that I got that was kind of brutal, and there were serious mistakes on part of the dentist, I began having the same problem. And then I learned that my sister and now another brother are having the same problem. Yeah. So this happened to me many years ago, and I began to try to look for healing. In fact, initially I thought of going after the dentist, and getting and sue him. He deserved it really bad. I said, no, this is not about money. I'm going to look for healing. I'm not going to look for money, and neither I'm going to look for revenge. So I was angry, yes, but I decided to look for healing, and then I went to a chiropractor. He helped me a little bit. I went to a Feldenkrais practitioner. I went to several dentists, and everything helped it a little bit, not much. But I discovered some things that were related to nutrition, like, for example, drinking too much coffee was bringing this into full experience, and it was very uncomfortable. So I regulated the dosage of coffee because coffee is helpful for the brain, it helps to focus and so on. But I regulated it around one shot espresso. There is no problem. With 2 shots espresso, sometimes then the symptom starts again. And it can become pretty uncomfortable. And then gradually, the realization came that this was of a neurological origin, definitely, and it was happening side by side with a significant overexcitation of the thinking process, meaning that there were a lot of thoughts going on in the brain, and simultaneously this was going on. And if I was able, in one way or another, to calm the brain, then the problem, the symptoms were gone. But if I was careless and going again into thinking, boom, the symptom was coming back. So I noticed that this was being triggered by certain foods, and eventually, by reading his book, Blaylock's book, I found out that certain foods that I was ingesting, that I thought were completely benign, are poison for this problem. In fact, one of them is a product that is sold everywhere in the supermarkets, and that product contains glutamate.
Monosodium.
No, glutamate. Just a moment, please. I will bring it to you. And I was using this product generously in my diet because it has a lot of amino acids. So it's very, it looks like great brain food, but it contains glutamate in a free form. So it comes from soy, it's organic soy. It's called amino from brag, that is supposed to be a natural things and so on, and but it's really a poison. Yeah, and I didn't realize that I was drinking something that was so against having a healthy neurology and a healthy brain. So one of the things that I learned in this book is that it's not just MSG, but any product that contains glutamate in a free form can be even more offensive. And the products that contain glutamate in a free form and that are capable of triggering excitotoxicity with the consequence of neurons dying are usually coming from soy and other products, and they are labeled in supermarkets as vegetable protein. And this is labeled exactly in those terms, vegetable protein. And what Blaylock explains in his book that is so revolutionary in a way is that these vegetable proteins are several times worse than MSG. So I was ingesting massive amounts of this garbage, every day, at least twice a day. In my salads, because it's tasty, I was replacing salt by this product that is salty, right?
Yeah.
And it's like a soy sauce, but supposedly much healthier, right? Now, soy sauce deserves a special comment because usually I had already discovered that soy sauce was an excitotoxin, especially most soy sauces that are put in the restaurants and in Chinese restaurants and so on. The
Kikoman.
Yeah, that is poison, because whenever I was taking that, I was having ocular migraines. I began to see flickering lights in the peripheral vision, and they were vibrating, and then sometimes they were starting at the center, then moving to the periphery, and eventually disappearing after the excitotoxicity was gone.
What did you do? I remember the story. You took something that got rid of it pretty quickly.
Yes, there is some measurements that you need to take immediately to protect your neurons, and one of them is to take carbohydrates. Yeah, you ingest a fairly large amount of simple carbohydrates to protect the brain. Why? Because you want to increase glucose, and glucose is neuroprotective. So that's the one thing. And the second thing you want to do is to increase your vitamin C. So you immediately get vitamin C down the throat, and you keep your levels of vitamin C relatively high. Yeah, that's the second thing and the third one is vitamin E. See, most of these antioxidants help, but some cross the brain barrier very easily and others don't. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you take L-glutathione, Blaylock explains that L-glutathione tends to do not cross the brain barrier and tends to be expressed in very small amounts inside the brain. However, vitamin C does cross the brain barrier very easily, vitamin E also. So you want to load immediately yourself with vitamin E and vitamin C and glucose in order to protect the neurons. And of course, the best protection, is avoiding these foods, right? You don't want to have an excitotoxic reaction in your brain, because basically you are destroying your brain.
Are there any parts of the brain that are more exposed to excitotoxicity than others?
That is mysterious in the sense that the excitotoxicity seems to affect in different people different parts of the brain. So that's why some people develop Parkinson, because it has affected the neurons that produce dopamine. But other people develop ALS because it has affected the neurons that control movement. Yeah?
But glutamate is not represented mostly in one lobe. Glutamate is more of
I think that glutamate, is an all-pervasive substance that it works in every part in the brain. Mm-hmm. Now, according to Blaylock, you can decrease all the symptoms by reducing all the substances, increasing your vitamin C, and in every meal having some amount of carbohydrates, depending on your tolerance to carbohydrates and how much physical exercise you are doing, you can begin to quiet down the brain. yeah, so that to quench all this thing. And I have been doing it already for some days, and I would say that my symptoms that have to do with this problem, where I can see the excitotoxicity in action, have decreased immensely. Yeah, I'm so thankful for what I'm doing, and for all the material that the good information that is in that book. And I'm passing, of course, the information to all my family, because they all have this little problem compared with other people.
I release mental tension through my jaw also.
There it is.
When I chew my cheek.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah. And I have bruxism also at night.
You are having at that moment an over neurostimulation in your brain, likely some glutamate, excess of glutamate. Now, it may not lead to neuron death, yeah, or it may lead to just very small amount of neuron death, so that perhaps something more serious may manifest, in your 80s or 90s. But of course, since you have so much time available to correct the problem, I would suggest that you begin to correct it. Yeah, and one of the most interesting things I have found in the process is that this responds not only to nutritional interventions, it responds very effectively and very well to something that may sound initially esoteric, but is totally scientific, and it comes from an individual that he's a scientist in New York that has a practice of neurofeedback, a very successful practice of neurofeedback for more than 30 years, and has been also into research.
What's his name?
And his name is Lefemi. It's a French name, L-E-S-F-E-H-M-I. Yeah, and Lefemi wrote a very good book that is called The Open Focus Brain. Yeah, and I highly recommend that you read that book. In fact, I suggest my students usually to read that book in the course in Psychology of Consciousness, not in this course. But it's so intimately connected with the problem of neurotoxicity and overstimulation of the neurons that I highly recommend that you read it. And also, I would recommend that you begin to practice immediately when you feel this symptomatology, that you begin to practice immediately a very simple exercise that will stop immediately the symptom. Yeah, because it slows down the brain instantaneously. So how this works is very simple. I'm going to explain it to you, but I want to finish the nutritional part first, and then we go into this particular exercise that has more to do with consciousness and the use of attention or consciousness, which is intimately connected to the brain, not because the brain is the origin of consciousness, because it's the opposite, right? Science has it backwards, but because consciousness is using the brain as an interface to perceive, to see through it the physical world, right? So consciousness is prior to the organism and will survive the mind-body organism, but in the meantime is using the mind-body organism, especially the brain and the senses, in order to see through and perceive the world. So the work of Lefemi is a work in consciousness. It's the research of how you use attention. And it's fascinating. And through that process, he came to the conclusion that he is consciousness, which means, as we have discussed before, that he woke up. What it means that he woke up, he saw through the false identification, which is conceptual only, that he was Lefemi, and that he was so-and-so with a story and all that crap. Nothing of that is true. He realized, I'm just pure awareness. I am consciousness, right? But let's go back to nutrition first. In the case, when it comes to nutrition, The first thing that I want you to be aware of is, because during the video classes I insist, in the importance of the low glucose diet. And nowadays, with people doing little physical exercise, the low glucose diet can be life-saving, because you don't burn all that glucose in your muscles like before, that you were finishing a meal and work in the fields and burn all the glucose. No, and then glucose in itself becomes toxic in excess, in the toxic for the brain and for the body. So and it creates insulin resistance, the excess of which leads to all type of problems. Therefore, the low glucose diet is definitely the way to go. But with people that do less and less and less physical exercise, they begin to notice that the sensitivity to glucose gets worse and worse through the years, and then they need to cut down carbohydrates until they are basically living in almost like a ketogenic diet. And the problem with this is that you need a certain level of glucose in order to protect the brain, from neurotoxicity and from the excitotoxins, which are so abundant in our society. Why they are abundant in society? Because the FDA, in its typical lack of integrity, has allowed the industry to label MSG as simply natural flavoring, natural flavors, right? So people are being deceived left and right, and they have no idea that they are consuming MSG in huge quantities, not small quantities. When the story of MSG is a very interesting story. It's like the revenge of the Japanese. See, when the Americans landed finally after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, they found out that every meal, their rice, everything was tasting better than in the States. And they asked, and then the Japanese told them, well, we add this algae to the food. And then the Americans investigated what was in the algae, and the active ingredient was monosodium glutamate. And then they synthesized the monosodium glutamate, and a new industry came forward that today is a billionaire industry, because the amount of MSG that are used in our food is monstrous. And they have so much power that they have lobbied the FDA and corrupted the FDA so that the FDA will allow this label as natural flavors. They are natural in a way because originally MSG was coming from this algae, but one thing is the algae that has all the other components, another one is to separate, this one substance, and MSG doesn't seem to be, it might be okay when it's used in small amounts, but the trend of the industry has been to duplicate the amount of MSG in the foods every 10 years. So you figure the numbers, okay? We are consuming now horrendous several grams of MSG in one little product. Why? Because the more tasty you make the food, the more you sell it, right? And there's no limit. The FDA puts no limit to the use of MSG. So now, that's why I was telling you the revenge of the Japanese, because probably more people have died here in the States due to MSG and are dying than in during the explosions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it's just a joke, I'm not trying that they in any way tried to deceive us. It was our own doing. And then the next thing that is fundamental from a nutritional perspective to keep in mind is the following. Every supplement that you take come into question from this perspective. Everyone. Because the response to the supplements is also unique, you know. So how this organism is responding to the supplements is different than somebody else, and the brain may respond in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So if the cocktail of supplements that you are taking is producing a overexcitation of the neurons, then you need to figure out what's going on in the supplement program to avoid that. So when I read the Blaylock's book, I began to suspect that in my fairly large supplement program, I could have other substances there that could be offensive to this brain. Not as much as this thing, not as much as MSG, which I was avoiding for years anyway, but they could be offensive. And then I found through the book that he was talking about cysteine, yeah, as being very offensive, at least to some people.
Excuse me?
Cysteine.
Really? I take N-acetylcysteine.
I'm going to go there. So cysteine, which is again a natural amino acid, right? But in a free form, for some people, can produce excitotoxicity. Now, he immediately began, to think, okay, what about NAC, N-acetylcysteine? Because this has been presented by the literature as life-saving supplement, one of the greatest supplement that you can ever take for several reasons. First of all, it's a powerful antioxidant, about 10 to 15 times more powerful than vitamin C. Second, it's inexpensive. Third, NAC is an expectorant, meaning that it cleans the lungs. And if you live in a city like Los Angeles, and millions, billions live in cities like this contaminated, then NAC can be a fantastic supplement for cleansing the lungs. In fact, I had a student, I had a friend that his wife was having every year an asthma attack that was. She was ending in the hospital, almost dying. And then I told her to take NAC, and after taking NAC, gone. Yeah. So NAC seems to be something really extraordinary, and of course, lots of people take NAC. So I kept reading with great interest, to see if he was mentioning something about NAC, and I looked at the end of the book for NAC, and I found nothing. But finally, at the end of the book, there is a note about this. And he says, many people have wrote to me asking if NAC could be offensive too, could be a neurotoxin. And then he says, NAC is fine. NAC increases glutathione, which is protective for the brain, and NAC, as far as I know, is fine. Yeah? However, and then he adds, and it can be consumed for up to 3 or 4 grams a day. He gives a fairly large dosage, suggests a fairly large dosage, that where NAC still could be safe. But then there is a note at the end of his little paragraph that he says, I wish, however, that we could find an antioxidant that will increase L-glutathione and that will be safer. I said, I was reading that. It was kind of late in the evening, and basically I brushed the last sentence to the side, and I celebrated that, okay, NAC is good because this is one of the most powerful anti-aging substances, that I take. And then I go to my cabinet, I grab NAC just to celebrate, and I take a quarter of a teaspoon, I put it and I drink it. And it was not with the purpose of doing any research or checking. Yeah. In less than half an hour, I was having a photophobia, an explosion of photophobia, and the symptom. So it created excitotoxicity in this brain at least, which shows you how mysterious is this, that even today this MD with all his specialization into excitotoxins, still he doesn't have all the answers, and there is a personal component to this that is very, very real. So, of course, I stopped taking NAC immediately, and this has contributed to calm down the problem in my jaw even further.
Really? Wow.
So, talk about tricky, right? Tricky things.
One thing I find curious is
I want to add, Daniel, that this, because of this mysterious condition, and it's so personal in a way, that every supplement that we take needs to be checked for excitotoxicity. Yeah, every antioxidant, and you need to research it online. You need to check that what people are discovering, what scientists are discovering in regard to this element, and do your own experimentations with your brain. Do not panic. You're not going to die. All your neurons are not going to die overnight. Plus, remember that there is what is called a brain plasticity, which means that the brain is capable of creating new neurons. And so it's not that all of a sudden you will have a whole neurological syndrome because you got a little bit of NAC. No, but you need to run your own experiments. You need to check, and when you recommend to a client any supplement, you tell them, notice the effect. Try the supplement by itself. Notice if there is any, during the next half an hour or hour, if there is any indication of accelerating thoughts or any exacerbation of any thing that could be neurological. I think that we really need to give attention as nutritionists to this issue very carefully.
Yeah, I agree. Funny coincidence, last night we were looking at NAC in this big book, Prescription for Nutritional Healing.
Yeah.
Big fat. And it says that in order for NAC to produce glutathione, it needs glycine and glutamic acid.
That's right.
Wouldn't that mean that NAC could lower because it's going to use up glutamic acid in the process of producing glutathione?
That's right. That's right.
So then
yes, so what you're saying makes sense, right? NAC will use the glutamic acid in a constructive way, will create a glutathione, which will protect the brain from excessive. So NAC would be perfect, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, you cannot deny your own experience.
Yeah.
So the acid test is when it comes to your own experience, and if NAC doesn't produce excitation of the brain or doesn't produce anything that any neurological activation that is abnormal, then you have there an anti-aging substance that is marvelous, and you have there a protective substance for the brain against neurological diseases. But if your brain reacts in a way that is different, then you need to respect your body. And yes, I'm going to try again because of all these benefits of NAC, these amazing benefits. I tell you, I definitely am going to try NAC again. But I'm going to try it I'm going to also respect more.
How much were you taking?
Huh?
How much were you taking, more or less?
I'm going there because I think that the devil here could be in the details, See, initially, for many years, I was taking NAC in the recommended dosage. The dosage was 600 milligrams 3 times a day. right? And sometimes I was only taking taking it 2 times a day, so 1,200 milligrams for long periods of time, and sometimes 1,800 milligrams. Then I began to read all these fabulous benefits of NAC that you are mentioning and other people are mentioning, and I began to increase it, especially considering that I live here in Los Angeles. Then I traveled to Chile, and in Chile, in Santiago is a very contaminated city also. And then I was with my sister, who is an MD, and she told me the following story, which is a nice story. She says, when she works with stem cells, and then she told me the story. She said, we cultivate the stem cells outside the body, but we don't insert them immediately into the body until we do a checking. What do they check? They check for your levels of L-glutathione in the system. They draw blood, they check the L-glutathione, the master antioxidant in the body, they check it out, and they find your levels of L-glutathione. If the levels of glutathione are low, they consider that body unfit to receive the new stem cells, right? So what they do is they give the patient NAC to increase glutathione so that these new cells will be protected, and then they insert them. So when I heard my sister, telling me these things, and I decided to increase my NAC, for anti-aging purposes and for brain protection and so on and so on. So I increased NAC, and I had bought an NAC in a bulk form, which probably comes from China, so that is a question mark, that because could be this NAC contaminated with something, could be, as the Life Extension Foundation doesn't recommend to use supplements from China because you don't know, there could be there, mercury or something like that. They are not that clean in China. It's a matter of seeing how their environment is, in what conditions it is. But anyway, I was trusting the product. It was looking white, and I don't know how pure it is, but let's say that it is pure, according to, because this is sold in the States, usually the companies that are selling these Chinese products, they will tell you that they are doing their own checkings here in a lab for contamination. So the product is from China, but it has the guarantee of this company that is clean. But who knows? The industry, doesn't have much integrity. So anyway, let's suppose that it was clean, that it was clear from neurotoxins. I began to increase the NAC, and I began to take eventually probably about 3 grams a day. So 3 grams was substantially more than the usual recommended dosage. But as you see, even Blaylock in his book, he recommends 3 or 4 grams per day as safe. And I expected, that. So while in Chile, I developed this photophobia. That became very uncomfortable, and I went to the ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist told me that there's nothing in the eyes, and that my photophobia or photosensitivity was in the level of normal or below normal for my age. That's an interesting comment, but the fact is, I never had photophobia before. And I never had such a photosensitivity before, so for me this was new and very uncomfortable, right? So nowadays, especially screens like the computer screen and other type of lights that are not reflective but the light comes through, are very uncomfortable for this eye. So I have to constantly regulate the light and use eyeglasses that filter UV and so on. But anyway, this photosensitivity was coincidental with my increase in the NAC. And then when I tested the NAC that night, as I mentioned to you, the first symptom that I got was high photosensitivity, and therefore this may be happening at the level of the brain instead of the level of the eyes. right? So you see, I learn in the body. I have learned nutrition with this body, yeah, in the most uncomfortable way you can imagine. but this is the way this organism learns. Otherwise, there is no motivation to even do any research.
Of course.
But most importantly, I think that the value of all this experience for me as a teacher is that I can share this with you today, and I can protect you and the people that will come later from these problems, at least to the degree that this information is capable of protecting you from that, because there are neurotoxins, in our environment that they are floating in the air, they are spraying the chemtrails with aluminum, which is a neurotoxin, and many other things. So
isn't also isn't it, I think there's something to do with the acetylcholine nature and sensitivity to light.
The acetylcholine nature and sensitivity to light.
Yeah. Because I know every time I'm very sensitive to the light. I usually find that places are lacking light. I'm always the one to come into a room full of people and say, "Why haven't you switched on the light? Don't you notice it's dark here? Isn't this too dark for you?"
Right.
I'm always the one who's adding light. And ever since we read the Braverman book, Svea, she always tells me, yeah, you're acetylcholine. And I remember we read something about that in the book. So maybe the fact that, you and me are both acetylcholine.
Right.
We're having opposite reactions to light, but it might still be in some way connected to acetylcholine.
It could be that the acetylcholine nature types are more sensitive to light. In fact, this was true for me also. This organism was very sensitive to dark spaces, and I always wanted to light them up. I always liked it very well lighted environments. And I couldn't understand how people could be uncomfortable with having more light in a room. It was totally out of my experience, so I was not even empathic towards them, because I thought that it was just neurosis. But I tell you this, it was corrective experience in that regard too, because I was able to now I'm able to understand what they experience. And what they experience in the opposite side is that the excessive light becomes much more a problem than low levels of light. So, for example, nowadays I find myself staying away from excessive light, dimming the lights in the evening, lowering the light of the computer. I always used to use the light in the computer at the top, and now I'm toning it down. So this sensitivity may have to do with the acetylcholine nature. Yes, it could be. But I think there is something a little bit mysterious, in the sense that, at least with what happened to this organism, because this organism was free of the problem. Yeah, and now the problem is here. I would say it's a little bit better, and it's improving with lots of things that I'm doing to try to figure this thing out, and getting my eyesight back to as it was before. I used to have a very good eyesight. Anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I would like to spend a little bit more time. I know we are on the hour, but if you don't mind, and I don't mind, I can explain a little bit more the part that has to do with consciousness, and how this affects, how we use attention affects neurotoxicity. And it's really fascinating. So Lefemi was doing some research with his neurofeedback equipments and his electroencephalogram equipments in New York, in his office, where he has his practice. And his intention at that moment was to find out what type of techniques coming from yoga or relaxation techniques that are being used in psychology, which come from yoga usually, were really effective at increasing alpha waves. That was the subject of his research. And he found that in general all these techniques like fractionated relaxation, visualizations, and the concentration on the breath and were ineffective. That in reality they had some effects, but they were inconsistent. And he was looking for something more consistent. So he had a subject connected to the EEG at some point, and he had an intuition of asking him to imagine empty space. So the subject imagines empty space, he's looking at the electroencephalogram, and boom, there's a burst of alpha waves like this, instantaneously. He kept researching with this technique, and he found that in fact, just imagining empty space immediately triggers plenty of alpha waves. So finally his research led him to find a technique, or simple technique, that is capable of doing the trick and increasing your alpha waves, which is something that is considered part of good mental health. Bingo. But his research led him later to see that what is it that imagining empty space has to do with the waves in the brain and the thinking process and meditation and so on. And he discovered that when you do this, when you go into open focus, when you imagine empty space, you go into open focus. Yeah? And what that means? It simply means that the attention opens up. Yeah? It opens up instead of being narrowed down. So we are in narrow focus when the attention is looking at the screen and I'm completely focused into what's going on in the screen, working, typing a letter, and that's narrow focus, typical narrow focus. You're typing a letter, you're concentrating in the thoughts, and you're concentrating in the typing, and blah, 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 and then you are in narrow focus. Any question?
Probably you're also in narrow focus when you're thinking about some kind of a problem while you're driving your car and you're chewing your tongue.
Right. You're in narrow focus in all those situations. When you are driving your car with worries in the head, worries are the worst to bring you into narrow focus, because the moment you worry, the attention goes into those thoughts and it obsesses with those thoughts and narrows the focus into thinking, into that thinking pattern. So it's the worst. Now, in narrow focus, you don't have alpha waves. You have plenty of beta waves and gamma waves, high energy waves, and the brain is right? However, if you are driving the car and you are worried, and suddenly you just do something as simple as driving and begin to notice the noise on the street of the passing cars, and you notice that, you are dividing the attention in two, right? The driving and noticing the sounds or the noise of the traffic. The minute you divide the attention in two, that's it. You are into open focus. And the minute you do that, alpha waves come to help you. And the brain slows down. And the worrying is over. So open focus attention is the panacea for this. Yes, tell me.
Would you say that also? You said listening to the sounds around you, but how about paying attention to your bodily sensations, which is resulting from the narrow focus?
Yes, it's very likely, that if you are driving the car and you're giving attention to the driving, and at the same time you begin to notice the sensations in the body, you have divided the attention into two, you're in open focus now. So there are a zillion possibilities, of course, because the senses are providing, with, I think it's today, is estimated in hundreds of gigabytes per second of information to the brain. So it's so easy, to defocus into two things. In fact, you can learn to defocus into three things. You can also notice the weight of the body on the chair, the noise of the computer, the noise on the streets, the conversation, and the focus opens up, right? So there's nothing mysterious about this. It's very simple. It's ingrained, in the characteristics of consciousness, because attention is consciousness. It's not different than consciousness. It's consciousness. We say, I'm giving attention to the sounds in the streets, or I am becoming conscious of the sounds in the street. Consciousness and attention are the same thing. Yeah? Same awareness. I'm aware of the sounds in the street. So, awareness, consciousness, attention are all the same. This mysterious non-dual, because obviously consciousness or attention is non-dual. It's not positive or negative, it just is, right? It's like a focus that opens up or closes down. Opens up or closes down. But the closing down of into worrying or into working obsessively generates lots of thoughts, while the open up calms down the brain. Or you go into open focus and you calm down the brain immediately. Mm-hmm. So it's the perfect meditation technique, because also you don't need to cross your legs in the morning, you just can spend the day in open focus all day long. Right?
To me there's a very strong opposition between control and letting go. I would say narrow focus is always, in one way or another, control.
Yeah. Yes, narrow focus is about control, open focus and concern about control, and open focus is about letting go. Yeah. That's true. So it has psychological implications too. So this Dr. Lefemi, he found out through his research that yes, humanity is suffering from unthinkable amounts of suffering just because we have lost the understanding that we need to be in open focus, not in narrow focus. And when we were in the
that's the reptilian brain, no? That's keeping us focused on the danger.
Yeah, the reptilian brain keeping us focused in the danger. Yes. Not only that, think of life in nature. In nature, you naturally go into open focus. You tend to be in open focus. You are in the jungle. If you are not in open focus, noticing everything that is happening around you, you may die, man. It may cost you your life. So it's natural. You move through the jungle in open focus. Now, if a tiger comes right in front of you, you go into narrow focus and you immediately see what the hell is that animal is going to do, and you observe all its body language to make sure you know that it's not going to attack you. But if the tiger turns around and leaves, and you keep walking your path, you go into narrow focus again, right? Because you want to know what's going on around. And narrow focus is a state of relaxation, but alertness. So now we have developed a civilization that is obsessively into narrow focus and is obsessively worrying and concerned.
Like this.
Right. Right. Exactly. This thing.
Very narrow.
Very narrow focus.
They're making the screens bigger, but it's not helping.
Right. However, if you grab the iPhone and you begin to do this, but you keep a little bit of the attention in the noises that are around, bingo, you were not caught. Now, it may take some training to do this, but I guarantee you that it's worth mastering this, staying in open focus all day long, because not only this is neuroprotective to a great degree. I mean, the minute I begin to bruxate, I go into narrow focus, it's over. Yeah? If this starts again, it means that I went into narrow focus. I'm concerned about the thoughts that are going on here. I move into open focus. That's it. Over. It's extremely neuroprotective. Not only is neuroprotective, the best news is the following. If you begin to spend your time during the day in open focus, I guarantee it, happiness is yours. It's as simple as that. If you do this with certain consistency, there will be happiness all day long.
You know what? It's actually quite amazing. What you're saying, all this that you're describing, it's exactly what has been the focus of my personal development for the last few weeks.
The focus of your personal development during the last weeks.
Like yes. the main subject for me in my the thing I'm working on on myself.
You're working on this on yourself.
I'm working exactly on this. And yesterday,
that's good.
And yesterday I made a little list because I find it hard. Some days I find a really good key to transition into open focus.
Into open focus.
Yeah. And then I say to myself, "Oh my God, I found the key! Right, this is great.
Right.
Tomorrow I'm going to use this key again."
That's right. Yeah? That's right.
But what happens? It's tricky because the open focus becomes the object of my narrow focus.
Yes, because you get to worry about it. Right.
I'm thinking, hey, I want to stay in open focus. 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 And the result is, it's actually. It's like trying to take a chewing gum off your fingers using your fingers.
Right.
Yeah, you end up like...
Yes, if you begin to worry that I am not in open focus, that's narrow focus, you are worrying, and that's it. You lost the battle.
Tricky.
So
this is why... And sorry, just let me finish.
Yes.
To me, what helps me get out of this loop,
yes,
yeah, is that the solution cannot be in the mind. The solution cannot be...
the solution cannot be in the mind. Of course not.
It's because the mind is...
The solution is in consciousness.
Yeah, but... exactly, but it's... The mind likes to...
figure it out.
The mind likes to pretend it is consciousness, right?
Right, it pretends that it is consciousness.
It likes to... It
pretends that it is
a moment... Yeah, exactly. A moment of inattention and hope your mind is... disguised as consciousness. And for me, the trick is the greatest realization I've had with this is that the body is key. The body is how should I say this? The body awareness.
Yes, body awareness.
Body awareness is the key for me to basically always be able to get into open focus. Not me. If I rely on a visualization, if I rely on a nice thought, on some kind of a mental formula to take me to open focus,
it doesn't work.
It works maybe once. It works for a while, and then but one thing I found very reliable is to as soon as I realize that I'm in narrow focus, I pay attention to how this narrow focus is manifesting on the physical level.
Yes.
And as soon as I do this, I disidentify with it.
Very good. See, it's personal, Daniel. You're finding something incredibly valuable for yourself, which is that the sensations in the body, you're probably a kinesthetic type of person. The sensations in the body lead you, by noticing them, leads you immediately into open focus. For example, in this organism, one of the easiest way, especially when, for example, I'm working with you, how do I go into open focus? Why we are having this conversation? Well, very easily. I notice the sounds around, yeah, the noises and sounds that are around, the noises of the environment. If I'm in a coffee shop, it's even easier because there is so much noise, right? So it's personal, but there is one thing that I would like to emphasize here, that is that eventually, unless you are focused, like in this case that we are really focusing into what's happening in this very moment in our conversation, and it's easy to go into narrow focus. It's too easy to go into narrow focus, so I use the device of listening to the the white noise of the heater, that is the fan, is, as you can hear it. But however, if I'm just walking on the street and I don't need so much concentration, a very simple way to do this is, and the simplest of the simplest, at least that I have found, is to just do it. What means by this is consciousness, either narrow focus or open focus, is a natural function of consciousness. Therefore, it comes the time that when you have practiced this type of tricks and techniques and methods, it comes the time that they are not necessary. You just go into an open focus. You just say, it's a skill. You say open focus, okay, to yourself, and you go into open focus. You don't say anything, just do it. You just do it, you just go into open focus.
I know exactly what you mean.
And you know what I mean, right? So ideally, you want to be into something so simple that is not even a technique. It's not even a technique. You have bypassed all the techniques of yoga, all the techniques of awareness, all the techniques of everything. You are not imagining even empty space. You just open the focus, man. Now,
it's like opening your eyes.
Right, yeah. It's like opening your eyes or closing your eyes or moving your fingers. Okay. Yeah. The next thing that I would like to mention that is extremely important to have it clear. This guy, Lefemi, in his book, if you read his book, and I highly recommend.
I definitely will, yeah.
At some point there, he's a scientist, so he's trying to avoid probably, the conflict of the identity, because scientists are very self-centered. And so for science, which is totally unscientific because it's not possible to find that thing, but for science, they say me here, or a little bundle, separate consciousness looking to the universe, and there is another me there, another little bundle or self or little self looking to the universe. And to make things worse, science will tell you that this bundle of consciousness that is separate from the rest is, in reality, springs from the brain. The complexity of the brain generates consciousness. Well, it's totally the opposite, right? Consciousness is before the brain, and brain is being used by consciousness to look into this experience. And at the end of life, when the brain disintegrates, consciousness survives, is sustained in the astral body, and then, comes all the thing that we call the level of the soul. We have talked about this. But in reality, through this exercise and through this work, Lefemi woke up. What does it mean that he woke up? It's clear in the book. He says in the book, I am awareness, meaning I am consciousness. So he realized through this work that he is consciousness, that he is this focus that opens up and closes down, and that he is not the mind, he's not the body, he's not the ego, meaning all the identifications with all the ideas about me and my story and my problems, right? And I am Gian, and I am 60, and I am American, or I am Chilean, or all this, I am this, I am that, this basket of thoughts and ideas about me, they are ideas only, they are not what I am. I am the awareness that is seeing all those thoughts when they come through the screen of the mind. So he realized his true self as awareness through this work. So in reality, I want to encourage you to insist in shifting your identity to the right place. The right place is I am awareness. Just undifferentiated awareness, not a particular bundle of consciousness, that is separated from the rest of the universe, because that's not true either. When you notice in your experience this seeing, this awareness, this consciousness, this attention moving, closing, narrowing, you notice that it is, first of all, non-dual, second is constant or eternal, all the time is there, and third is undifferentiated. There's nothing in the experience of consciousness that can say, that could tell me that this bundle of consciousness here is different than the consciousness that is seen through that plant or through an animal. There's nothing to indicate that there is a difference. So basically we are left with a simple observation. We are left with the fact that what is seen through each organism in the universe is undifferentiated consciousness. So it's like having many vessels with different colors, different shapes, that have the still water, and the still water in each one of them is the still water. It's not different. So the consciousness that looks through any human being, that sees through any plant or any animal in the universe, and including alien beings and reptilians or whatever, this is just the divine consciousness, the one universal consciousness. So when awakening is extremely valuable to get rid of the narrow focus. Why? Because
Exitotoxicity.
And excitotoxicity, because you stop obsessing about you, because you saw through the lie of the me, I, and you see that story of the me and the I, and I am Daniel, was a story the same as Santa Claus. You were told that Santa Claus was real, but at some point you realize it's a story, right? So you were told that Daniel is real and that exists, with such and such characteristics, and has had all this story up to this moment, and it's a story only. It's the same as Santa Claus. You are not Daniel. You are pure awareness, and I am not Gian. I am pure awareness. It was a story. Now, this leads to the irreversibility of awakening, meaning that same as when you saw that Santa Claus was not real, there is no way that you can regress back, because it would be total madness to say, no, it is real, No, you saw it. You went to your dad's a closet, you opened, and you saw there the Santa Claus garment, and you realize, okay, it was not real. So the same thing. You look into your own experience. I am awareness. The me I cannot find it anywhere in my own experience. Therefore, and you can repeat the experiment 1,000,000 times. So the awakening is irreversible. You realize that it was a story. That's it, and it helps immensely to decrease the obsessions into narrow focus. Do you see that?
Absolutely. But what if the story? What if the story of our how do you say it, identity? What if the story of your identity, this Santa Claus lie?
Yeah.
Yeah. What if the story was told to us by our survival instinct, and it is based in fear?
Well, survival.
It's like a biological. It's like a biological. It's like, I see it like two poles. Like the human. The human is the battlefield, not between good and evil, but between awareness, which is fully open focus, right, and the illusion of our identity has its roots in fear, which is a result of our survival instinct.
Yes, got it. No,
Yeah.
it's not like that. See, animals have the same survival instinct that we have, but self-consciousness and the imagination that we are a me or an I is something very human, and it's conditioning, societal conditioning. So the survival instinct will, after awakening, will continue. The fear response to a real threat will happen in the mind-body organism after awakening too. Yeah, but it will be perceived by this perceiving, this awarenessing, and that thing, your true nature will not identify with what's going on in the mind-body organism. So the mind-body organism may eventually die, but there's a part of you, your real self, that is detached and is at peace in the midst of crashing worlds. As Yogananda puts it, in his teachings, he said, the yogi, the self-realized yogi, is at peace in the midst of crashing worlds. Enlightenment is not what people think. It's not a cosmic consciousness experience. It's peace under all circumstances. That's enlightenment. Peace under all circumstances is open focus under all circumstances, or narrow focus when it's absolutely necessary, because of the work or whatever, and then, but without worrying, so that there is no suffering. No suffering, peace under all circumstances, that's enlightenment. Awakening helps enlightenment, but enlightenment is superior. Enlightenment or liberation is when we are 24/7 at peace, right? So you can imagine the significance of the simple skill, which is to go into open focus at will, because that is the door to enlightenment. The awakening in your case happened already, Daniel. You have it already. You know that you're not Daniel. You know that you are awareness, and that in itself is immensely helpful to practice open focus, right?
It's a skill, like any skill, it needs to be mastered. Right?
Well, it's very helpful to the awakening helps immensely because you stop worrying about you. At least decreases immensely the worrying about you. But the open focus comes later as a skill that is immensely useful to attain final liberation from all suffering, because nothing is capable of contracting you.
Yeah.
And then, yes, there is some embodiment work that needs to do after awakening, so that things will not contract you, like strong negative emotions in the organism may still create some contraction, or strong sensations, so negative sensations. So you want to do embodiment work. That's what I do in the courses Psychology of Consciousness. I spend tons of time into that, because the course starts with an awakening, and hopefully my student will wake up in the first 2 classes, and then the rest of the course will be spent into embodiment of the awakening, helping them to stay in open focus. But this, now what I'm discovering, that this is totally interconnected with the neurology of the brain, as you're seeing, and the neuroprotective, how this is immensely neuroprotective.
Yeah.
But I'm not discarding, you see, the nutritional part, as some people, that they will lose the holistic perspective of life, and they will discard the nutritional. They will say, oh no, it's all consciousness. I deal with every problem in life through consciousness. No.
Don't you think GABA?
The body can drive you crazy. So let's be careful.
Don't you think that GABA could play an important part in avoiding excitotoxicity?
GABA may play an important part in the sense that it might be also a neuroprotective substance.
Because it actually counteracts, right?
It tends to calm down the brain. So if GABA crosses the brain barrier, in your case or in your client's case, use GABA, that also can help. Vitamin C is a neuroprotective substance. Glucose is a neuroprotective substance of great significance if it's in the right range. Avoiding hypoglycemias. Blaylock points again and again on the importance of avoiding hypoglycemias. That's why the snacking during the day is so important. That's why when you feel nervous, you're working nervously and you feel that you are going through some hypoglycemia, and to grab something to eat is not coping with food, is life protective measurements, right? Neuroprotective measurements. To eat something healthy, increase your glucose somewhat, make the brain comfortable.
Totally. Actually, I bought a book today that might have some interesting information about all this. I'm pretty sure. It's called Gut. It's actually it's a big bestseller right now.
And I would say that this is also connected to the problem of neurotoxicity, because I suspect that Candida and other microorganisms that develop abnormally in the guts can produce neurotoxic substances that will increase glutamate. What for? Will make your brain restless, will make you go into suffering, and you will naturally look for foods that feed the candida, like white sugar, right? So these critters, are diabolic, man. They know the biochemistry of the brain, they know the biochemistry of the body, and they can play with your biochemistry too. Yeah. I have to go. This was a terrific session.